Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Friday, December the 20th, 2024. Today there is a trine aspect between Venus and Jupiter, and this is what I want to talk about as my main topic. So at the end of the video I'll be talking about Venus trine Jupiter, and I'll be considering what it means, and also I'll be giving some examples of people with this aspect and also some events. Now, of course, Venus trine Jupiter has a very nice reputation, but what about reality? Well, maybe the reality is more complicated than it seems, and Venus trine Jupiter, although in theory it's a pleasant aspect, it may not always be so. Anyway, before I talk about Venus trine Jupiter, I want to consider the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is Friday, December the 20th, 2024. And I have to ask, if you're in a position where you like this video, I would be very grateful if you would like it. And if you're not a subscriber, then I'd be really, really happy if you were to subscribe. But of course, don't subscribe if you don't like the video. Anyway, let's look at what's happening today. So here is the chart for noon in New York, December the 20th, Friday. And we can see that the moon is in Virgo, beginning of Virgo, so at noon New York time. We have the moon here, and for some of us that might be something of a relief, because there haven't been any planets in Earth signs unless you count Uranus, and I don't really count Uranus in terms of evaluating the elemental balance of what's going on at the moment. I mean, I'm really into elemental balances. When I look at a chart, I always consider if anyone's got any blanks. In other words, if they don't have any planets in an element. And when I do that count, I don't count Uranus, Neptune and Pluto, because Uranus, Neptune and Pluto, they're generational. These are in a sign for the years, and at the same time they're discovered planets, and in my opinion the discovered planets don't really have the same kind of immediacy as the personal and social planets. Of course, the personal planets, Sun, Mercury, Venus, Mars, and Sun, Mercury, Venus, Mars and the Moon, and the social planets are Jupiter and Saturn. So anyway, the moon moving into Virgo, it does create some grounding. We do feel that there is now something to hold on to, and it may be that there are things we now notice that we just hadn't noticed before. We're having to deal, I suppose, with a bit of reality, and that might have been missing. Maybe we'd been too pessimistic, maybe too optimistic, and we just hadn't seen things for what they really were. So I think that in many respects the moon moving into Virgo is a good thing. Now, as far as timing is concerned, the moon moves into Virgo at 7:37 a.m. London time. So that means if you're in Europe or Africa, moon moves into Virgo this morning, so you can regard it as being a moon in Virgo day. If you're in the Americas, well, the moon moved into Virgo very early. In fact, if you're in California or British Columbia, the moon would have moved into Virgo last night. And on the other hand, if you're in Asia, Australia, New Zealand, then the moon will move into Virgo later in the day, and it might not move into Virgo until this evening. So that's the moon, at least the moon in Virgo. The moon in Virgo makes a square aspect to Mercury. You can see that, the moon in Virgo making a square to Mercury in Sagittarius. Okay, that moon in Sagittarius, moon Mercury square, might be a little bit argumentative. It might be that we have something to say and people might not always agree with us. But I mean, I don't think it's going to be super argumentative. It might just be that there could be a misunderstanding. Now, just before the moon moves into Virgo, when it's in very late Leo, it makes a trine to the sun. You can see there's the sun in the last degree of Sagittarius. So at the beginning of the day, particularly if you're in Asia or Australia, New Zealand, with that moon trine Venus, there may be a certain sense of harmony, things coming together, being able to relate to people, and perhaps a certain sense of calm just before the moon changes sign. Now, the main aspect of the day is Venus trine Jupiter. And so we've got Venus 15 Aquarius trining Jupiter, and this aspect is not just about one day. I talked a lot about Venus trine Jupiter yesterday, and I think that over the weekend we're still going to feel the impact of this trine. And Venus and Jupiter are very fortunate planets. They are Jupiter is the greater benefic, Venus is the lesser benefic. So in theory, when they're in trine, things should happen in a way that is perhaps natural and fairly fortunate. And you could say, well, if things can go well, maybe they will go well with Venus trine Jupiter. Additionally, there is a biquintile aspect between the Sun and Mars. So that means that the Sun and Mars are 144 degrees apart. So Sun and Mars as a pair are quite assertive. They like to throw their weight around. They want to get noticed. They're very active, very masculine. But it's a biquintile. So it being a biquintile, we might have to struggle a bit to make it happen. And so what this might be is Sun biquintile Mars is about perhaps the idea of action. We might be thinking, yes, we could do something dramatic and dynamic. It's certainly something we can think about. But can we actually make it happen? And so some of us might feel, for example, that we don't have as much power as we want, but we have an idea about power, an idea about how we would like to assert ourselves. And so it may be about planning something and then at some stage being able to execute it. So it's not automatic Sun biquintile Mars. I think it's more something that has to be worked on. But if we do feel we don't have enough power, then it does seem that there is something we can do to change the situation. So that is a picture in New York, moon in early Virgo. If we change the focus to Sydney, Australia, noon in Australasia, or noon in Eastern Asia, you can see that the moon is at 26 Leo. So if you are in Australasia and Eastern Asia, it's not really a moon in Virgo day. It's more of a moon in Leo day. So there are going to be some differences. The moon is in Leo, making a trine to the sun. There's still 4 planets in fire signs for most of the day. Sun, Mercury, Moon and Mars. And I think that moon trine sun is particularly nice. So I would have said if you're in Australasia and Eastern Asia, it's probably going to be a smoother, easier day, and perhaps a day where there is more action than if we're in, say, Australia. In the Americas, for example. Now, turning to the heliocentric picture, we don't see a great deal going on, but heliocentrically there is a square aspect between the Earth and Neptune. So there's the Earth at 29 Gemini, and there is Neptune at 29 Pisces, and so that aspect is exact. Now, the difference in Neptune's position geocentrically and heliocentrically is small. So the further out the planet is, the closer it is to, or rather, the geocentric and the heliocentric positions are increasingly minor. So Sun square Neptune is the same as Earth square Neptune, and it's just that I kind of like to see the Earth square Neptune because it's, or see this aspect as Earth square Neptune because in a way it's more descriptive. The Earth is where we are, and it's square Neptune, and perhaps that talks to or describes the uncertainty that people are feeling, and people are certainly feeling a bit uncomfortable, not sure what's going on. I know in the Americas, you've now got more concerns about government spending, and I think that Trump has strongly suggested that Republican members of Congress don't support the spending bill, and so that's raising the threat of governmental paralysis, and the markets are feeling a bit nervous, although last time I looked the main stock markets were up in the Americas. At least that's on I'm looking at it from a perspective of Thursday. I'm not looking at it from a perspective of Friday. But there is this uncertainty in general, I think, with Earth square Neptune. And I know we got the run up to Christmas and people are supposed to be more relaxed about it, but I don't know. This time round, people aren't quite sure where things are going, and I think that this is reflected by Earth square Neptune. And of course, with Earth square Neptune, we have to be careful with all the Neptunian things, like things happening unexpectedly, people being devious, poisonings, accidents connected with water. This is all Earth square Neptune, which is pretty much the same as Sun square Neptune. So aside from the Earth square Neptune, which we kind of already knew, we have Venus on the Jupiter-Saturn midpoint, and I kind of find that interesting. You can see, but you see, there's Jupiter and there's Saturn, and so Venus and Jupiter are square. Jupiter and Saturn are square, and Venus is on the midpoint, and I think that this aspect, which is, Venus is actually making a wide semi-square to Saturn, it's making a wide semi-square to Jupiter. So that aspect may actually be quite important, and not necessarily from a personal perspective. Because if you look at what's going on in the markets, and, we had, on Wednesday, the stock market was in the US was strongly down when it was announced that the Federal Reserve they put down interest rates by quarter of a point, but quarter of a percent. But at the same time, they said they weren't going to have so many rate cuts next year. At least that wasn't their plan. And of course, the markets. They already knew the rates were going to go down a bit, but markets did not like that at all. I think the Dow Jones was down something like 800 points. And that is a reminder, perhaps, that Jupiter and Saturn are related to the business cycle. And I think I probably need to discuss that in a video very soon, probably early next week. I know I'm supposed to be thinking about happy things like reindeers and I don't know, smiling Santas and that kind of thing. But, there are more important things to be thinking about. But Jupiter square Saturn is a business cycle. We've got Venus on that Jupiter-Saturn midpoint. Venus is about money. And so concerns about money and concerns about where money is coming from, especially particularly now, there's this concern about, certainly in the US, about a government shutdown. So it is making things a bit difficult. And that's maybe how this Venus on a Jupiter-Saturn midpoint is working. Also, we have got Uranus on the Venus-Jupiter midpoint. You can see that quite clearly. And it is at a time when Venus and Jupiter are in trine, geocentrically. So with heliocentrically, the Venus-Jupiter midpoint occupied by Uranus, that might be surprises. In terms of relationships, there could be surprises, which may be a kind of quite fortunate surprises that we might see with Uranus on the Venus-Jupiter midpoint, and it's just to remind us that things are not necessarily set in stone, and things might happen that we weren't expecting, and people might behave in ways that we weren't expecting. So that's a heliocentric picture, and now I just want to look at the astrology for the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Friday, December the 20th, 2024. Aries. Aries, the moon is changing sign, and it's moving out of Leo into Virgo. And with the moon making this sign change, you might feel that things are slowing down a bit, and also that there might be fewer opportunities. I think over the last couple of days with the moon in Leo, you might have had a sense of enthusiasm, a sense that many things might have been possible, and I think that you were really able to focus on what you could do, and perhaps you realize that there were many different things that you were able to do, or at least have the opportunity to do. But now with the moon moving into Virgo, it just might feel that not just that things are slowing down, but that there are things you need to do. Just things, routine things, that really can't be put off any longer. And you might not want to do it, but I think you're going to feel that it's the best thing to do, or perhaps the only choice. And because of that, there may be a certain sense of irritation. It's a Friday, you wanted to do something else, but you know that certain things just can't be avoided. So Aries, do what you have to do, and I don't think it can be put off. Okay, you could, in theory, put it off until the weekend. The moon will be in Virgo on Saturday as well, so it's with these forecasts of the 12 signs on a daily basis, it's very difficult to divide things up into discrete days, how one day is going to be completely different from the next day. Well, tomorrow, moon is also going to be in Virgo. So perhaps over the next couple of days, you can just do what you feel you have to do, and don't complain about it. But I suppose it's a chance to actually put the work in and turn your organizational vision into reality. Now, on the surface, Aries, it might not seem that you have a great deal of power. It might just seem that your resources are starting to diminish. Your sort of emotional, inspirational resources just aren't what they were. However, the sun, in the last degree of Sagittarius, is making a biquintile aspect to Mars. And that biquintile aspect is not immediately available. It's not just easy to access. You think Sun aspecting Mars, Sun in Sagittarius aspecting Mars in Leo, that sounds immediate, it sounds very dynamic, but it's a biquintile, and biquintiles have to be constructed. You can have a vision of the way something should be, perhaps a vision of you being a dynamic Aries, being out there, demanding things, getting your way. That's your vision, but it's not the reality, I don't think. Yet you don't have a vision for no reason. You have a vision because there is a possibility that you can turn that vision into reality. And it's about hard work. It goes back to what I was saying with Moon and Virgo. There are things to organize, there are things to sort out. But that vision has to be constructed. You have to create a situation. I mean, if you want to be in full control, if you want to have a lot of power, you need to create a situation where you can actually get that power. And so that might be something you just need to do. It might just seem a little bit fake and contrived, but look around you, just get a sense of the power dynamics, and then make the changes that are required of you. You can do it. So the great thing about that Sun biquintile Mars is that it does give you an element of choice. Sometimes, you think this is a situation where you have no control and there's nothing you can do about it. Well, here there's plenty of things you can do about it, and through your conscious efforts, you can you can in the end put yourself in a position where you really can get what you want. Taurus, the moon is changing sign. It's moving from Leo into Virgo, and this does create a change of emphasis, and I think that this sign change by and large works in your favor. So what we've got here is the moon moving from a fire sign into an earth sign. And also Taurus, it's about the moon moving from a part of your chart, Leo is, from your perspective, in some respects, is the most family-orientated sign. It's a sign that represents the roots of who you are. So that's Leo, and the moon is moving out of Leo into Virgo. So I think that you are becoming less introspective, less completely concerned about your own interests. And with Moon and Virgo, I think you're feeling that you do have more freedom and there are more possibilities out there for you. Now, that's not the way everyone is responding to Moon and Virgo. I was just talking to Aries, and I was suggesting to Aries that Moon and Virgo might be a time where you're having to deal with responsibilities, but not in a Taurus chart. For Taurus, it's a time when you can really look at what you can do, look at your capacity to do things for yourself, and you can, in your own way, I think, be extremely creative. But your creativity, it's not anything vague. I mean, creativity is a word that does get overused. Got to be creative. I don't know really, what does it mean to be creative? I mean, creative is about making things, feeling that you're doing something great, but it's not vague. And you as a Taurus know that it's not vague. But if you want to be creative, you actually have to make things real. And with the moon moving into an earth sign, Virgo, you can make things real, and you have your various abilities, but you can actually make them tangible so that people can actually see what you can do. And so that might be how Moon in Virgo works. And it could be about the planning of enjoyment. So you can see how not just you, but other people can amuse themselves, enjoy themselves. But you also realize it needs a little bit of organization, and that is something you can certainly do with the moon in Virgo. Now, the main aspect today is arguably a trine between Venus and Jupiter. So yesterday I talked about Venus trine Jupiter, and of course I was very positive about it. But the way Venus trine Jupiter works, of course, it depends on your sign. It also depends on things like where the moon is. And so Venus trine Jupiter for you is an influence that is very positive. Venus is your ruler; it's trine Jupiter, and with Venus in Aquarius and Jupiter in Gemini, I think that it's an aspect that can actually be quite material for you because you're a Taurus, and it can be about putting your own ambitions first and seeing an opportunity for advancement and really taking full advantage of it. But maybe yesterday you weren't able to fully take advantage of this Venus trine Jupiter because the moon was in Leo. With the moon in Leo, there weren't really any planets in Earth signs except for Uranus. But now the moon is moving into Virgo, you can actually start to use that Venus trine Jupiter in a practical, down-to-earth way. So Taurus, if there is something you want, if you feel you want to advance your ambitions, or if you want to impress people and start preparing for your next big advance, whatever that might be, now might be the time to do it, because the moon in Virgo does give you a sense of what is possible, and it alerts you to the details that matter. And so I do think that Venus trine Jupiter works extremely well with the moon in Virgo. So I think today it's a day when you really shouldn't be lazy. And I know it's nearly Christmas. It's a Friday, got a weekend. I don't know if you're in a Christian culture, you might be worrying about shopping, buying things, preparing things of a jovial nature, but I wouldn't fully recommend that. I mean, I think you can have a good time. I think with Moon and Virgo, you can be happy, you can be jovial, but you don't want to just get caught up in joviality just for the sake of it, because it does seem that there is stuff you can organize, stuff you can put into action that could sort of benefit you in a longer term, not just thinking about Christmas, thinking... Again, it depends on your culture, doesn't it? You may not come from a Christian culture, but not just thinking about Christmas, but thinking about where you want to be over the next couple of months. Remembering, of course, that Venus is now in Aquarius, and Venus in Aquarius, for you, Taurus, it's a little bit of a taskmaster, isn't it? Venus in Aquarius, Pluto in Aquarius. Pluto in Aquarius wants things, and it has a set of goals, and it wants you to achieve them, and it certainly doesn't want you to waste time on trivialities. Gemini, it's a day when you perhaps feel that it's time to change gear downwards. You don't want things to go too fast. You don't want things to be too abrupt, too unpredictable. That's not what Gemini wants. Gemini wants things to be under their control, and I think that predictability is going to matter. Now, I mean, I know that predictability is not a word that you normally use when you're describing Geminis, but I think this Friday you're going to want to know what's happening. You want to know what's going on, and you do, to an extent, want to be able to just organize yourself and just make sure that nothing is going to happen to unravel your plans. So, Gemini, it may be a day when you just want to stick to what you know and trust. I think that could be important. I mean, there will be some irritations. I mean, the moon, when it moves into Virgo, does make a square to Mercury. So Mercury is your ruler, moon square Mercury. being irritated by something. It may be certain people are irritating and they're wanting your attention, and you don't really want to give them your attention, and you're just happy in your world, and you just want to stay in your world, and you don't want to be, you don't want to be distracted. And if there is too much distraction, you might just say things which you don't mean. And so that is a possibility, Gemini, that you say something because basically you want people to go away. I mean, there might well be that sense. And in general, Gemini, you almost want to lose yourself in something today. You're not fully thinking about any wider set of goals. Not really. You want to think about something wider, and you just want to relate things to perhaps things that are collective, and that requires sort of contemplation. And you're just not in the mood for making things happen. That's just not something you really want to do. And probably the best way of spending today is just to spend it at home. Do what you feel is necessary. Preparations, making sure that your home is as good as it possibly can be. Maybe things have got disorganized, maybe something needs to be clarified, and making sure that there's just nothing happening which could upset your harmony. So really, Gemini, that's today, and I don't think I really need to say any more. So I mean, I'm afraid it is on a sort of boringness scale. It's quite high on the boringness scale. Maybe 7 or 8 out of 10. But you can't have non-stop action, and if you make things boring and predictable, and you just make sure you just do things that need to be done, that I think would be a constructive use of the day's energies. Cancer. The moon is in actually quite a good position at the moment. The moon is moving into Virgo, and it is said in astrology that the moon joys in the third house. So from a sign perspective, Virgo is the third house from Cancer. Cancer number 1, Leo number 2, Moon number 3. So with the moon joining in the third house, it's a day when you perhaps do start to feel comfortable as the moon moves out of Leo into Virgo. You can do things that you enjoy doing, but I don't get a sense that it's an especially spectacular day. I mean, I don't think you actually want it to be a spectacular day. You have things that you want to do, that you enjoy doing. It's actually a very good day for doing things connected with words. Now, that might be reading, it could be writing, it could be talking, but talking in a way that is quite sort of understated. It's not a time when you want to get involved in heated arguments and conversations. You don't want that. I mean, I suppose it could happen because at the end of the day, particularly if you're in the Americas, the moon does make a square to Mercury, and that moon square Mercury might encourage you to talk too much, or may encourage someone else to talk too much. But I don't think that's really what you want. I think, Cancer, you essentially want to keep things simple. And if things are simple, then really that means that you're feeling good about yourself. And Yesterday I talked about Venus trine Jupiter, and I said to you, Cancer, that the opportunities are not really in the public eye. The opportunities, they're quite private. They're things you work out on your own. And with the moon moving through Virgo, perhaps that's more of the same. So with moon moving through Virgo, you're perhaps quite attentive to detail. You see things. Perhaps you see things that other people don't see. And that does give you opportunities. You can uncover things which no one else had noticed, and you don't have to make a big fuss about it. You just start to see the truth, and once you're in possession of the truth, that gives you the opportunity to really take advantage of it. But again, it's all in an understated way. I don't think today you really want to draw attention to yourself, and even with communicating through the verb, through the written or spoken word, Cancer, that there are limits to what you have to say, and you say something, you make your point, and you make your point again in quite a subtle way. There's no need to use capital letters, and you make your point, and people understand your point, and then you can just move on. And with this moon in Virgo, there's no need to be too imaginative or to be too forward thinking. Moon in Virgo is about the collection of facts, finding out things, and you don't have to, at least to begin with, you don't have to try and find a connection between different facts. I suppose it's more of the process of getting hold of the information, getting hold of the content. I suppose if one wants to use an academic analogy, it's a kind of research when you might be analysing lots of interviews, and you're trying to create some broad themes. I don't know, you interview people about something, some topic of research topic, and you're trying to draw some theoretical conclusions. But to begin with, you're just transcribing interviews, and you're just categorizing it, and you're just looking at the individual words. And you're at that stage. You're not at the stage of drawing big conclusions. You're just assembling the information, and that is very much Moon in Virgo moving through third house, the house of its joy, and that's something that you're doing. I'm not suggesting you do academic research, but it's more about understanding your environment and not feeling you have to reach earth-shattering conclusions. It's more about assembling the data. Leo, there might be something a little bit accident-prone about you today, and I mean, I don't want to make a big deal about it, but I suppose I have to point it out. So let me explain what the issue is. So there's the sun. The sun is in the last degree of Capricorn, and if you look at the chart, you look at what the planets are doing, you will see that the sun in sorry, did I say the last degree of Capricorn? I meant the last degree of Sagittarius. The sun in the last degree of Sagittarius is opposition the Mars-Uranus midpoint. You can see that. The sun, the opposite placement for Sun at 29 Sagittarius is 29 Gemini, and 29 Gemini is halfway between Uranus in Taurus and Mars in Leo. So, with the Sun opposition to Mars-Uranus midpoint, that might mean, that you might be accident prone, that you might be just tempted to rush into something. There is a certain amount of haste today. I don't know why you feel yourself to be in such a hurry, but you do seem to be. I mean, it may be because you know that the sun is about to move into Capricorn. Sun at 29 degrees 18 Sagittarius. We're on the brink of Capricorn. Another day, tomorrow, we've got the solstice to consider, and of course, in my horoscopes of the weekend, I plan on looking at the solstice. In the northern hemisphere, it's a winter solstice, the shortest day. Of course, it's the longest day in the southern hemisphere, and so perhaps you feel that everything has to be done now, and made more pressing perhaps by the fact that it's a Friday, it's the end of a week, there's a hurry. But don't be in too much of a hurry, and don't push people, because that Sun opposition to Mars Uranus midpoint, I think it does affect you more than the other 11 signs, all things being equal. But it does affect everyone, and everyone at some level is being a little bit hasty. And so if you push people, they might push back. So do get an idea for your own limits, what is possible. And you don't want to be in a situation where you're having to just deal with a difficult and explosive situation, which basically needn't have happened. But it was just because you were in too much of a hurry, or you basically hadn't thought things through properly. So there is certainly a note of caution there. And I suppose, ideally, Leo, you should actually be starting to be a little more sensible than usual, because the moon is moving out of Leo and it's moving into Virgo. And so with the moon moving into Virgo, it can be a time when you have to deal with basic material issues, how things are structured, how things are organized, and of course we shouldn't forget money. So money could, over the next couple of days, be important. It could be something that you have to address, and you don't want to be in a situation where you just worry about money because you don't feel there's anything you can do. There's plenty you can do. And if you ignore money and if you ignore material details, it could still bother you in the end. So, the moon in Virgo makes a square to Mercury. Now that square could be about tomorrow, Saturday. I mean, it's sort of Friday, Saturday thing, that moon square Mercury. And that moon square Mercury could be about agitation. You'd like to enjoy yourself, but you can't enjoy yourself because you're worrying about the consequences. Perhaps you're just worrying that something costs too much. I mean, if you go, I suppose, let's say you have an expensive meal and you can't really afford it. How can you enjoy that meal fully when you know there's going to be a bill at the end? So if you are planning on enjoying yourself, try not to do things that are expensive or that might be financially irritating in the end. Because, as I like to say, real enjoyment doesn't require expenditure. And how money is spent just could bother you, and I think you're going to be quick to notice financial details. Now, that needn't be a problem. It could be an advantage, Leo. Particularly in the run-up to Christmas, when people are spending a lot of money. I suppose that depends where you are, depends on your culture, depends on the traditions of your family, if there is a family. But there is a temptation to spend too much money that everyone has. But with that moon in Virgo, you're aware of every penny, every cent you spend. And that might mean that you actually have an opportunity to restrict expenditure. And remembering that the moon is starting to make an opposition to Saturn. It's not just making a square to Mercury. By tomorrow, the moon will be making an opposition to Saturn. And I know moon opposition Saturn has a certain sort of difficult reputation, but there are advantages in moon opposition Saturn. The moon opposition Saturn can control things that are excessive. And one thing excessive that it can control is expenditure. So, this might be a time, Leo, where the less you spend, the better you're going to feel. Virgo, the moon is changing sign, and it is moving out of Leo into Virgo. And of course, Virgo is your sign. So it's always good, isn't it, when the moon moves into Virgo. At least for you it is. It just feels that you understand what is happening, and no longer are you confused. I mean, I think for many people there has been a sense of confusion over the last few days, and there are a number of reasons for that confusion. One reason might have been the fact that we had the Sun square Neptune. I mean, the Sun is still square Neptune, but it's not as strong as it used to be. And so there might have been a feeling, where are things going? What is the basis of your security? Are you in control with Sun square Neptune? And also, there were no planets except for Uranus in Earth signs, and for a Virgo that might have been distressing. But the Earth drought is very much coming to an end. Not just as the moon it's not just the fact that the moon is moving into Virgo, but we also have the Sun on the verge of moving into Capricorn, and tomorrow is the solstice. By definition, the solstice is when, or at least the winter solstice in the northern hemisphere, by definition, that is when the Sun moves into Capricorn. The exact moment of the winter solstice in the northern hemisphere is the exact moment that the Sun moves into Capricorn. So that creates a lot of Earth. Suddenly the Sun and the moon are going to be in Earth signs. So with the moon moving into Virgo, you feel, I think, more secure and more in control, and you want to extend your control. Now, there may be some irritations on the way. The moon is making a square to Mercury later today. It's also making an opposition to Saturn. I don't want to worry too much about moon opposition Saturn today, because that's more about Sun. It's more about Saturday. But certainly with moon square Mercury, there could be things irritating you, particularly later in the day. Small details that you feel you need to talk about, and you feel they can't wait. So if something bothers you, you're going to want to discuss it, and that's particularly in a domestic setting. So that might mean when dealing with your family, you have to be a little careful. So in a family setting, if there are family members around you, I don't know, if a member of your family does something that bothers you, perhaps a less responsible member of your family, someone who is more careless, you might want to bring them to task straight away. You might want to make it clear that they've done something you don't appreciate, and that is moon square Mercury. And with that moon square Mercury, perhaps you need to ask yourself, is it necessary? Is it really necessary to bring something up? Is it going to change anything? I'm not saying you should tolerate other people's bad behavior, but single instances of bad behavior should not necessarily be a source of immediate aggravation, because moon square Mercury, that could represent an argument, just a little bit of unpleasantness about something which may, strictly speaking, not be necessary. So if you're going to get involved in an argument with someone, make sure it's on. Make sure the subject of this argument is something significant and worth bothering with. What you don't want is to argue about something that really is completely unimportant. And also, Virgo, from a spiritual perspective, there is a certain case for letting go. Letting go in an environment when the moon is in Virgo. So the moon in Virgo, you're not going to allow things to sort of move into the rack and ruin. You're going to want to be in control. You're going to want to have your finger on the pulse, at least in terms of organization, plans, what's going on, and all of that kind of stuff, which I think Virgos are often very familiar with. So I'm not saying that you have to forget about all of that, but you can at the same time just let go. So you can be aware of the material details around you and understand that they're important, but at the same time you can also just let go of something and just not feel that you have to try too hard, trying to become, perhaps instead trying to become part of some wider whole and just getting things into perspective. And maybe actually, Virgo, in the end today, that is your challenge, getting things in perspective. Libra. I can continue with what I was talking about yesterday, I mean, quite easily, because yesterday we had Venus moving towards a trine of Jupiter. The Venus is still trine Jupiter. So, as I was explaining yesterday, that trine between Venus and Jupiter is really an entirely fortunate aspect. At least in theory it is. I mean, at the end of this video, I'll be looking at Venus trine Jupiter in more detail, and I suppose I'll be pointing out some examples of some events taking place with Venus trine Jupiter which were not necessarily fortunate, but I think in terms of what's happening to you on a personal level, I think that this Venus-Jupiter trine should very much work in your favor. It has a direct impact on Libra, which is your sign, because Venus and Jupiter are both trine the sign Libra. And so with this aspect, I think that you have a sense of comfort, a feeling that things are moving, and also a sense of excitement that there are opportunities out there, and there are some really interesting things to think about. And these things, they may be about opportunities in general. I think that it could be also a sense of purpose. I mean, I suppose that's what everyone is looking for, isn't it? A sense of purpose. I think we're all looking for a sense of purpose. I think that you could say that once we find our sense of purpose, we sort of transcend life and death, don't we? We're doing the right thing. We're on the right path. What happens now doesn't matter because we've sorted it all out with this sense of purpose. And I'm not saying that you can completely find your sense of purpose in your life goals today. That would just be hyperbole. But you can go some way towards finding a sense of purpose, feeling that you're on the right track. And this goes back to what was happening in May when Jupiter moved into Gemini, and Jupiter is now retrograde, and so perhaps it's a time when you can be going back on some of the events that were taking place but over the last half of the year or since May, and just realizing that it is all for a reason, and that you were given things for a purpose. Venus in Aquarius, that represents you as an individual who have been given things, given talents, abilities. You've been given them, and now with Venus trine Jupiter, it's a time when you can really bring them out into the open, and you can feel a great sense of fulfillment. And what's great is that you don't actually need anyone's help, especially now that the moon is in Virgo. The moon is in Virgo is just saying, well, it doesn't matter if no one can see what you're doing. It's not about getting loads of attention. It's real satisfaction, a real sense of purpose is something private. In fact, if you talk about your sense of purpose, in a way, you're degrading it, you're devaluing it. A sense of purpose, a real spiritual sense of purpose, is something which arguably goes beyond words. It's just something you feel and you're going in the right direction, and the less said about it, the better. And so I know that there might be temptations to talk about your plans, talk about what you're trying to do, and I think that temptation might come from the fact that the moon is making a square to Mercury. But that moon square Mercury might be about telling people things you don't really want to talk about. So as a Libra, you're quite a friendly sign. You like to tell people what's on your mind, but sometimes you can be a little too open. And with that moon square Mercury, you need to recognize that there are some things that should be talked about and some things that really shouldn't be talked about. And as I've already said, it's not a time to be talking about things that are important to you, because as soon as you put words on something, you do, in a way, you limit it, and really that's not something you want to do. And also, Libra, I think over the course of the day you're going to feel a sense of natural authority. It's not about telling people what to do. It's just feeling that you're in the center of things and that you know what you're doing. And in fact, that you are an authority. And so you don't have to worry about being contradicted. I'm not encouraging you to be arrogant. There's always things we can learn, but you should just accept that there are some things that you really understand, and you don't have to explain it. You don't have to put yourself on a defensive, which is a good reason why you shouldn't be talking too much about things that are important to you, and just enjoy your authority and have a great day. Venus trine Jupiter does offer you a great day, and you can have a great day without needing anyone's help. Scorpio, in a way, Scorpio, you're a little more sort of sociable than usual. I think that you can deal with a certain amount of social pressure. I suppose it's a time of year when people often are somewhat sociable, and I suppose to an extent you're able to get into the spirit of things, and you can certainly go through the motions of having a good time and of socializing, and you know how to behave, and you know how to make people happy. And to an extent, again, it may seem to you a little bit fake, but so what? You are, I think, actually today very good at playing roles, and I understand that Scorpios don't often like playing roles. They like to be genuine, but if you have to play a social role, I think that is something you can do. But probably the main aspect today is a biquintile between the Sun and Mars. So Mars is, of course, your ruler, and so if it's biquintile the Sun, that means that the solar principle can be integrated into your being, and the solar principle is very active, it's very dynamic, it's about selfhood, but it's a biquintile. And as I like to say about biquintiles, they are about planning. They're about having a vision about how you want things to be, and then finding out how you can turn that vision into reality. It's not a natural aspect. I think the vision itself is natural. You can have a vision about how you want to be, but then the execution of that vision is not natural. You have to go out of your way to actually make it happen. So if we think about Sun and Mars, Mars is currently in Leo. It's in a high-profile sector of your chart. The Sun rules Mars, so to my mind, that biquintile between the Sun and Mars is about you trying your hardest to extend your power and authority, and it's not spontaneous. The vision of power and authority might be spontaneous, but the actual creation of that power and authority has to be worked through, and you have to consider the environment in which you're functioning and consider other people's strengths and weaknesses, consider what is possible. And also, timing can be important. You get the wrong time, then things aren't going to work. But as a Scorpio, I think you are in a position where you can actually understand the timing and put yourself in a position where you can get that timing right. And when you get that timing right, you will immediately be taken seriously. And one trend that's been going on over the last few days, maybe a week, is this ability for Scorpios to exercise sudden, unexpected authority. That's something you very much can do, and I think that the Sun biquintile Mars is going to really help you even more. So I think it's a deceptive day because it looks as if on the surface that not much is going on for Scorpios, but actually, if you look into it and you particularly focus on that Sun biquintile Mars, you realize that yes, it is actually a day of action, but it's a day where you have to work it all out. It's not entirely spontaneous. Sagittarius, you may feel that there is a certain sense of transition, and perhaps over the last couple of days there have been things that you have been sort of working out, trying to get a handle on, and it hasn't always been easy, but what you were looking for was a framework with which you could understand your overall direction. And there might well have been a sort of a spiritual or a philosophical side to it, trying to work out what the purpose is, what you're supposed to be doing, what is the right thing to do, what is the wrong thing to do. But you're starting to make these decisions, and now I think that you're starting to become clearer about what you want to happen and how you want things to be. And it may just be that over the last couple of days, perhaps with Sun square Neptune, things weren't particularly clear. Things were being deliberately hidden, but now things are clearing, and you can see the details that matter. And now that you see the details, you know what you want to do, you know what you would like to do. And the moon is making a square to Mercury. Moon in Virgo squaring Mercury in Sagittarius. And that moon square Mercury, I think for you, is possibly quite a fortunate aspect, because it does enable you to say what's on your mind and tell people about your ideas and what you'd like to happen. And not everyone's going to agree with you. There may be some pushback, but I think that if you are persistent and you really stick to what you know, then I think your views should eventually come through loud and clear, and people will understand. And also Sagittarius, it's a time when, if push comes to shove, you do know how to assert yourself. So if you are getting resistance and you feel it's really important to get your way, you can express yourself very dramatically, and I think people might be a little bit freaked out, but they will get out of your way. So there's absolutely no excuse, Sagittarius, for feeling any sense of powerlessness. I think actually you are in a position to make things happen. But in most cases, I don't think there's any need to be overly dramatic about it. Yesterday I talked about the fact that Venus is making a trine to Jupiter. Venus is still making a trine to Jupiter. In fact, that Venus trine Jupiter today is exact, and Venus is a fortunate influence. It's the minor benefic. It's making a fortunate aspect to your ruler, Jupiter. And with that Venus trine Jupiter, you can really communicate very effectively, and while you're quite capable of arguing and having disagreements, I think in most cases it's unnecessary. If you just state your views, state how you want things to happen, I think people will listen, and I think you'll be able to express yourself in a fairly sympathetic way in most cases, and I think that you will come over as being a fairly sympathetic person, and I don't think people are really, in most cases, going to want to defy you or tell you that you can't do things. So that Venus Jupiter trine does work for you, and as I said yesterday, that Venus trine Jupiter is good for relationships of all kinds. So if you want to get on with someone, you can, and if you want to get closer to someone, I think it's as possible as it ever can be with Venus trine Jupiter. It is a very fortunate aspect, and for you, it may well have a special connection with relationships. And Venus trine Jupiter also perhaps describes the way relationships can form, with Venus in Aquarius being about what you say and being able to talk about things in a persuasive but charismatic way. People are going to listen, and I think in most cases they're going to like what you say. Capricorn, you have been feeling this absence of earth, I think. Capricorn being an earth sign, and it's always important for Capricorns to have a little bit of earth. You don't want to feel out of your element, do you? But this has been a recent problem. I mean, the moon has every now and then gone into earth signs, but fundamentally there hasn't been any earth, and I don't really count Uranus in Taurus. So it is therefore something of a relief that the moon is moving into Virgo today. Quite when it moves into Virgo sort of depends on where you are. I mean, if you're in the Americas, moon is in Virgo, went into Virgo last night, early this morning, even late yesterday. If you're in Europe, Africa, moon goes into Virgo pretty early in the day. In the UK, it's at 7:37 a.m. In France or Germany, it's at 8:37 a.m. If you're in Australia and New Zealand, then the moon doesn't go into Virgo until this evening. So to an extent, it does depend on where you are. But overall, the moon is changing sign, and I think the moon moving into Virgo does give you, Capricorn, a greater sense of grounding, and things are starting to make more sense. Perhaps recently, there have been lots of things going on, lots of crazy ideas, no one entirely making sense, and this has kind of bothered you, but now things are becoming clearer, and you're going to be further helped by the fact that the sun is about to move into Capricorn. So today, sun is at 29 Capricorn in the last degree of, the 29 Sagittarius, last degree of Sagittarius, and tomorrow is the winter solstice in the northern hemisphere. And I don't know, if you're in Australia, do you call it the winter solstice or do you call it the summer solstice? I don't know quite how you see it if you're an Australian or a South African or a New Zealand astronomer. How do you see it? Is it the winter solstice for everyone because of this northern hemisphere bias? I don't know. But anyway, tomorrow is the solstice, and that is when the sun goes into Capricorn. And so sun moving into Capricorn, moon moving into Virgo, we get Earth. And we're going to get Earth for some time because, Mercury, next month, Mercury will move into Capricorn. So we are starting to get a little bit of Capricorn moving in, and Capricorn season. It's a sort of a rather spluttering season because we did actually have Venus in Capricorn quite recently, but then Venus left Capricorn. But now I think if it's at all possible to talk about the Capricorn season is pretty much on us, and that does mean that you're going to feel much more in tune with whatever is happening around you. And I suppose being in tune with things isn't always a pleasant experience, because if you're in tune with things, you're also in tune with things that are not right. And perhaps you've already started to perceive that something around you isn't as it should be. Maybe people have been behaving in a way that is incorrect, or worse. There could almost, in certain cases, be a sense of the evil, of unpleasantness that you're picking up on. But it's not personal. It's just you understanding what's happening around you. And maybe if you pick up on something that is rotten or evil, you're in a position perhaps to do something about it. I mean, that certainly is a possibility, although I don't think you need to worry about it right now. So as far as today is concerned, okay, you're preparing for the solstice, but the moon is moving into Virgo, and I think that with the moon moving into Virgo, you just get in general a wider perspective, and you start to draw conclusions, and perhaps you even want to discuss those conclusions. Now, your conclusions might be somewhat ahead of the pack. I mean, not everyone is going to be where you are, and so it's possible that you reach conclusions that other people haven't yet reached. So if you tell people things, they might not believe you. They might not agree with you. I mean, you're in the right, and you know that the people you're talking to will in the end understand that you're in the right. But right now, they're not quite there. So it just may be a day when you have to accept other people's short-term ignorance, or the fact that they've in the short term have deceived themselves, and you can only try so hard to persuade them, and maybe it's just best to let people reach their own conclusions in their own way at their own time, but of course in certain situations there is a matter of urgency, in which case you'll have to push things a little bit harder, and I suppose also with Moon square Mercury, maybe risk an argument. Aquarius, it might be a day for quiet satisfaction. I think there are some things that you're going to be quite pleased about, and you might feel that things are starting to move your way, and there is just a general sense of ease and flow, and that's because of Venus making a trine to Jupiter. You've got Venus in Aquarius, it's in your sign, it's trine Jupiter, and you might just feel that you're going in the right direction, that you're able to have a high degree of freedom, and in terms of other people, you can sort of present yourself in the right way without being overly dramatic. But I don't think that there's anything that needs to be shouted about, and you are capable of sort of self-awareness today, maybe great self-awareness, and perhaps you're able to see through things in a way you hadn't been able to do before. Things are becoming tangible, with the moon moving through Virgo, or at least starting to move into Virgo, sort of moving into sort of late Leo, early Virgo. That part of the zodiac for Aquarius, late Leo, early Virgo, there is a sense in which you're feeling that things are just becoming slightly more complicated. Things were easy, things were straightforward, especially in a social sense, but as the moon moves into Virgo, you're starting to be aware of a complexity there. And I know that with signs we're supposed to see a discrete difference, a sharp difference, for example, between Leo and Virgo. But I think looking at Aquarius from the perspective of the 12 signs, and in particular in terms of Aquarius, I think there is a little bit of a continuum there between late Leo and early Virgo. Just a sense that things are sliding into complication. And so that goes back to what I was saying about quiet satisfaction. You don't want to make too much noise, because it is a time when you do have to tread a little bit carefully. And certainly if you make too much noise, if you draw attention to yourself, you're just making things complicated for yourself, especially when the moon is making square to Mercury. Moon square Mercury might represent a situation where you are having to defend yourself, or talk about something you believe in, or perhaps having to put up with what someone else wants to talk about, and you might not be very patient with them. So Moon square Mercury suggests to me that in-depth conversations should be avoided. Okay, sure, you can keep conversations at a fairly light level, at a completely light level, actually, but as soon as you get deeply into things with other people, then things might go wrong. So again, the emphasis is on trying to be as quiet as possible and not drawing too much attention to yourself, though also recognizing that at the moment you are quite an appealing person. You come over as a pleasant, attractive person, and it appears that you've got something to offer. So, that's nice, but you don't want to take things too far. Talk to people, get on with them, but just don't go into things too deeply, because otherwise you might get yourself into a situation you regret, unless you really want to get really deep into things. I mean, I suppose there might be a minority of Aquarians who are attracted to things that are unpleasant, even people that are unpleasant. I mean, if that's what you want, attracted to people who are unpleasant, or people who have unpleasant histories, unpleasant stories, that might be something you, in some weird way, that you find you want to know more about. And I think I'm talking very much about a minority of Aquarians, but I think that is a potential that does have a certain possibility. Now, if you are an Australian or a New Zealander and you're an Aquarius, or at least that's where you are, you happen to be on Australia and New Zealand, it's a slightly different day, because the moon is actually going to be in Leo for most of the day, and the moon will be making a trine to the sun. So I think if you are in Australia or New Zealand for most of the day, you can perhaps afford to be more sociable and more open, and actually from a relationship perspective, things in Australia and New Zealand look pretty good for most of the day. I think by the end of the day, not so much, but certainly for the first 2/3 of the day, I would have said things should look really great for you if you're in Australia and New Zealand. But I understand most of the people listening aren't from Australia and New Zealand. So in general, for most Aquarians, I think it's a day when you don't want to say too much, and you just have to be aware if you do say too much, things just might get complicated. And I think that right now complication is the last thing that you need. Pisces, the moon is moving into Virgo. And of course, Virgo is your opposite sign. So that is one reason to think that relationships might be of some importance today, because Virgo represents the other. And when the moon is moving through Virgo, you realize that you have to deal with other people. Even if you don't want to deal with other people, their influence is still felt. And at the same time, Venus is trine Jupiter. So Venus trine Jupiter is a very relationship aspect, because it involves Venus. And so if you put Venus and Jupiter together, you get the idea of fortunate relationships working for you. And then you've got, I said, Moon in Virgo really supports that. So you might actually feel the Venus trine Jupiter more today than you did yesterday, especially now with the moon in Virgo. But you have to ask, what is the best kind of relationship? How should you be looking at relationships? And that Venus trine Jupiter, as I was telling you yesterday, is fairly low profile. It's about relationships working for sure, but not in a dramatic way. And it may be that you can take quiet action to get closer to someone, or perhaps if you've had recent disagreements with someone, maybe you can patch things up with Venus trine Jupiter. But ideally, it doesn't have to be out in the open. And in many cases, if you are trying to get closer to someone for whatever reason, it may not be a good idea to discuss the fact. I think that perhaps it's a time when you need to respect everyone else's confidence, even if there's no sense of a confidence. Everyone you meet, you have to sort of respect. You have to respect their confidence, and you kind of regard that as even if it's something completely trivial. So don't talk about other people in a sort of chatty, gossipy way, just for the sake of it. That's what you mustn't do. So don't say more than you have to. And the moon in Virgo is making a square to Mercury, and perhaps that's another reason why you shouldn't talk about people more than you have to, because moon square Mercury can be about excessive conversation, revealing things which don't have to be revealed. And that moon square Mercury could be about conversation getting too far and getting in your way. You're trying to do something, you want to do something, it's important to you, but someone has reservations, or someone won't stop talking, and they won't stop talking, and as a result, you can't get anything done. And so, Pisces, it can be a case where you just get caught up in things. I mean, that can be just a natural Pisces tendency, but you don't want to get caught up in things. And if someone won't stop talking, you have to know when to draw things to a close, even at the risk of seeming rude. But don't be afraid of asserting your power, Pisces, because at the moment, Pisces, you do have a lot of power, and you can bring this power to bear, and people will accept you. And if you say something has to happen or something has to end, and you are dynamic about it, I think people will just say, okay, that's it. We understand. So Pisces, don't underestimate yourself. I think relationships can improve over the course of the day, but not in a way that is dramatic. It's just happening in a fairly natural way, and I suppose the less said about it, perhaps the better. And that is the day from the perspective of the 12 signs. And from the viewpoint of the I Ching, of course, I asked my usual question, what is Fri Dec going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram 32, which is duration. And duration on the surface seems to be about things not moving. We want to just carry on with something. We just want to continue with it. We don't want a lot of change. We just want to be persistent. So if you started something, really stick with it. Now, the thing about this hexagram is that when I do the I Ching, there's a certain probabilistic element to the I Ching. I mean, it's completely about probabilities, about throwing coins. And there's a probability of a line being broken, there's a probability of it being unbroken, and there's a probability of the line moving. And in most cases, the line does not move. And so it's quite unusual to have a lot of moving lines. I mean, one moving line is kind of usual, perhaps two. But in this case, it got 5 moving lines. So with 5 moving lines, regardless of what duration means, that indicates to me that there is a lot happening today. There's a lot of just to and fro. You're doing one thing, then you have to do something else. Things look good, things look bad. And so you have to sort of kind of keep pace with everything. And, that could be hard work. So as far as, these moving lines are concerned, it seems to me that in general, you're in a bit of a hurry. You want things to happen, and there's a danger that you push things too far. I mean, like to begin with, that first line moving, it is about being in too much of a hurry and not necessarily having the resources as we move into the second line. We've got big ideas. That might be Sun, biquintile, Mars. Having those big ideas are things we really want to do. We've got the strength of character to do it, and we've got our plans. But then, when it actually comes to the world in which we're working with, there just isn't the opportunity. And so our personality, 10 out of 10, but the resources we have to work with, not 10 out of 10, more like 3 out of 10. And as a result, it may be very hard to get results we feel we deserve. But we do have to keep moving, and but also move into the right place. Because with duration, there is this possibility that we are too focused. We decide we're going to throw everything into something, and it says, the hexagram, what is it? It's the fourth line moves, and the fourth line moving is it uses a hunting analogy, and it's saying that you're in somewhere looking for something, and you're looking for game to hunt. It's just not there. And you can look as hard as you like. If it's not there, it's not there. I mean, if you, I don't know, if you're in the UK and you go to an open patch of ground and you start looking for kangaroos. You can look really hard for kangaroos. I suppose you can go to a zoo or a safari park, but by and large, if you take a patch of ground in a patch of land large, many acres, you could spend a long time looking for kangaroos. You could use all the resources available to you, but you're just not going to find them because they just don't exist. And so that perhaps is the problem there might be. You might waste a huge amount of time today on a task which is just totally pointless. And, in the end, there's just this general feeling of restlessness and just feeling that just things are not happening, and we want things to happen. So, I know there are going to be moments perhaps towards the end of the day where we do feel that we're making progress, where we are getting rewarded. But in the end, I don't know, today could turn out to be quite frustrating, and we're trying to do the right thing. We're trying to be persistent. But on its own, that isn't quite good enough. But with 5 moving lines, that does most certainly mean that we move to a second hexagram. And the second hexagram is hexagram 37, which is the family. And the family, which can be seen as a clan. The family is our people, our group. It doesn't necessarily have to be the literal family. And so perhaps it's all about trying too hard. We've been trying too hard to make things happen. We've been trying too hard to be reliable, trying too hard to do the right thing. And maybe what we were looking for was just right in front of us anyway. And we just need to relax with people who we trust, maybe with our family. And that's perhaps what the day should be about. And it's not about wasting our time, but it's just being with people who we know, who are there all the time, and also just understanding the limitations of the situation. The I Ching is a Confucian oracle, and the family is a social structure which needs to be respected, and people have their roles in the family. Some people are in control. They're the ones who bark out the orders. There are others who are receptive. They understand their role and they perform it, and then not trying to be noticed too much. And so everyone understands their role, and that just makes things easier. And it is a Confucian oracle, and that's the way it should be, at least in terms of the oracle. And so perhaps today, do ask yourself, what is your role? What is your role in the group? Are you trying too hard to be someone else? And if you can carry out that role, then I think that you can end the day on a satisfactory note. The main aspect today, astrologically, is Venus trine Jupiter, and I have been talking a lot about it over the last couple of days. Yesterday I went on about it. We've got it again today. And Venus trine Jupiter is an aspect that I think many astrologers are going to be quite excited about. There I've got a picture of Jupiter, Venus with the trine symbol, and Jupiter. It's because trine is a fortunate aspect. Venus and Jupiter are the two benefics. Jupiter is the greater benefic, and so Venus is the lesser benefic. So when they're in trine, it suggests that everything is smooth, everything is running very nicely. And so you might think that having Venus trine Jupiter in one's chart is a good thing to have. Is it a good thing to have? I think that Venus-Jupiter trine can, in certain cases, in certain senses, make you quite lucky. It might be, for some people, they're lucky right from the beginning. They're given advantages. They're born into certain advantages, certain things they have. But Venus trine Jupiter can be a little bit lazy. Things are just slightly too easy. And there can be a certain complacency there, that you just generally take the view that things will happen in the end. I mean, let's look at an opposite aspect. Venus trine Jupiter. The opposite of Jupiter is Saturn, the opposite of Venus is Mars. Compare that with, and the opposite of a trine is a square. Compare Venus trine Jupiter with Mars square Saturn. So you could say Mars square Saturn is one of the most difficult aspects in the book. But Mars square Saturn is at least dynamic. It might be tough. There's pain to have to deal with. There's irritation. There's frustration. So it gives, Mars square Saturn can give someone the motivation to make things happen, to make something of their lives. Whereas Venus trine Jupiter, it's just too easy. Perhaps things have been given to you on a plate. I mean, I know you might be listening to this and you've got Venus trine Jupiter and you've had a terrible upbringing and you might feel offended by what I said, but I'm talking about generalizations. And of course, there's always a subjective element to it. But there is a fortunate side to it. It can be about luck. It can be about bringing luck into our life, and it can also be about someone who is very sociable, who's got natural social skills, and people really like this person, and that they just are kind of relaxed and sort of talking about themselves, and sort of emotionally, it's supposed to be quite a free-flowing aspect. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by looking at a few examples of people with Venus trine Jupiter. Then I'm going to look at some events where Venus was trine Jupiter. Now, the first person I'm going to look at with Venus trine Jupiter is myself. And I have Venus trine Jupiter. Here's my chart, May 30th, 1962 at 3:35 a.m. And there is my Venus in Cancer, and there is my Jupiter in Pisces. And in theory, my Venus trine Jupiter is absolutely great. I mean, it's part of a grand trine with Neptune. So Venus is in Cancer. Venus is in the exaltation sign of Jupiter. Jupiter is in Pisces. It's in the exaltation sign of Venus. So I have a Venus-Jupiter mutual reception, and these two aspects are in trine. And so that should be great. And it's in water signs. Water and emotion and naturally flowing emotionally, no, it doesn't work. I'm actually quite awkward. I'm off the scale when it comes to introversion. If I do an introversion test, I'm really very introverted, and I'm very, very bad at small talk, and in social situations I can actually be very awkward because I just don't have a sense of emotional flow. I mean, in fact, some people might take the view I don't have any water in my chart, but I do. I have tons of water in my chart. So that's one way in which Venus-Jupiter can work. I suppose in terms of my upbringing, I came from a fairly prosperous family. I was given a good education. Went to private schools. Went to a good university. It was all very easy. Yeah, London School of Economics. Right now it's really difficult to get into the London School of Economics. But when I was applying, it was pretty easy. But so I had lots of things going for me. But as far as I'm concerned, I largely squandered it. So, and that is Venus trine Jupiter. Why am I, getting into astrology, and that's very Venus trine Jupiter, drifting off Venus, Jupiter, Neptune. If I'd had Mars square Saturn, I would have been perhaps more serious, and I would have been more hardworking, and I would have been more focused, and I would have been more ambitious, perhaps. I always am ambitious to an extent, but maybe I would have, been a lawyer or something, something serious. But so there is something rather indulgent and about Venus trine Jupiter, and now you might ask, why do I see Venus trine Jupiter like that? Certainly the awkwardness of Venus trine Jupiter. And you look at the background, you look at the way I present my videos. It's very dour, isn't it? I don't understand the material world really. And making nice, pretty videos, it's not something I can really do. I'm not really interested in. Of course, it must be doing massive damage to my viewership. But a lot of it is explained by Mars rising, Mars in Taurus rising. Mars is in its detriment, and angular planets are important. And I think if you miss that Mars in Taurus rising, you don't really get the chart, and it just perhaps stops Venus and Jupiter working perhaps as they might be expected to work. So yeah, always look at angular planets. Anyway, I thought I would start off by talking about me, and let's look at a few people with Mars trine Jupiter. Some people I know about, other people I don't know about. Alex Salmond. So Alex Salmond, he recently died, and he was leader of the Scottish Nationalist Party, and he was a very effective politician, and he was popular, and he came over very well on television and on the media. And you can see there he had his Venus in Scorpio, trine Jupiter in Cancer. That Jupiter in Cancer conjunct Uranus, it really, really does describe him, because in terms of his aspirations. So Cancer is a sign that you associate with Scotland. Scotland is ruled by Cancer as a sign. If you look at William Lilly's Christian Astrology, he looks at countries relating to the different signs, and Cancer is one of them. I mean, I've talked about this before, but you think about Scotland and the clans, and Scottish politics is a really complicated, really dense. It sounds like a bit of a nightmare, and it always has been the case. I mean, since the Middle Ages, even by Middle Ages standards, Scotland is complicated, and a lot of complex loyalties. I mean, I've never really studied Scottish history, but I think that Jupiter really is a Cancer sign. So he has Jupiter in Cancer. Jupiter conjunct Uranus in Cancer. Jupiter conjunct Uranus in Cancer is the desire to be free. Scotland wanting to be free from the United Kingdom. And he has, Jupiter in Cancer. And I think Jupiter was in Cancer around the time of the independence referendum in 2014, which of course the Scottish people voted against. So he has Venus trine Jupiter, and I would have said Venus trine Jupiter, there might be a certain sense of overindulgence. I mean, he actually has a grand trine in water. I mean, he looked to my mind as if he was a little bit overweight, and I think I got the impression he enjoyed the good things in life, and he died. I think he was in somewhere in the Balkans a few months ago, and he just died. I mean, he wasn't that old. He was born in 1954, so he would have been 70. He would have been coming up to his 70th birthday, so he was only 69. So that might be one aspect of Venus trine Jupiter. Perhaps overindulgence, maybe not looking after one's body, and one's health. So that is a possibility. But from what I can see of him, I don't know much about him. But that Venus trine Jupiter does seem to work very well. I mean, as far as his health and his being overweight, I mean, maybe I've got it wrong, and perhaps I'm jumping to conclusions there. But that is Alex Salmond. So someone else who has been in the news recently is Bashar Assad, and here is Bashar Assad's chart. So he was the former president of Syria, who had to flee his country and seek political asylum in Russia, and he has Venus trine Jupiter. And with Venus trine Jupiter, you could say that he was born with a silver spoon in his mouth. I mean, his father was incredibly powerful. His father was a successful dictator, completely brutal. And so that was what he was born into. He, you could say, didn't necessarily have to work up the ladder. I mean, he had the best of everything. He went to medical school, and he just wanted to be an eye doctor, I think. Maybe that could be Venus trine Jupiter, maybe wanting to help people. I don't know. I mean, I know that everyone says that Assad is a monster now, but I think it's kind of more complicated than that. We don't know how much control he had, and so with that Venus trine Jupiter, did he have to work to become president of Syria? Well, no, because he had a brother who was in line to be president of Syria. He just wanted to be in London and be an eye doctor, and it was all very easy. Then, unfortunately, his brother got killed in a car crash, and so straight away he was ordered back to Syria, and he was groomed to take over from his father, and so it was all handed him, on a silver plate. And then, when I suppose when the revolution came, I mean, he worked hard to defend the country recently, after the Arab Spring, but everything just faded away and he just disappeared. And maybe that's Venus trine Jupiter. In the end, Venus trine Jupiter just gives up. It's not working hard enough. It can't work. It doesn't have the discipline and to make things happen. Maybe Syria had been defended through other people's help. I mean, he got his position through his father, and then his regime was defended by other people, by the Russians, by the Iranians, by Hezbollah. So other people were helping. But then things changed, and Venus trine Jupiter just didn't have the dynamism to actually defend the country in the end where it really mattered. And perhaps if he had Mars square Saturn instead, he might have been able to pull it off. But no, he doesn't. He did not have Mars square Saturn. He has Mars trine Saturn, but not Mars square Saturn. You need that sort of dynamic square to make things happen. Now, another example of someone who has Venus trine Jupiter, who maybe was born into privilege, was Dodi Fayed. So Dodi Fayed, I don't have the time of birth for Dodi Fayed. So Dodi Fayed was the son of, is it Mohammed Fayed, the man who owned Harrods? And yeah, he was interested in film, and he made some films, but I think Dodi Fayed was a little bit of a playboy, and of course he had his association with Diana, and of course he was in that car which had its crash in 1997 when him and Diana and the driver were killed, and he indeed has Venus trine Jupiter, and so it just could be Venus trine Jupiter, born into privilege in his case. And look at that okay, he has got Saturn there, so Saturn is creating some kind of control over that Venus Jupiter. So it's not as if he did nothing. I mean, I think he did make some films. I don't know whether those films were any good, but that could be how Venus trine Jupiter works. Now, if you've got Venus trine Jupiter, if you've got a very close aspect, and that Venus trine Jupiter is relatively close, you may be quite sensitive to Venus-Jupiter events. And one Venus-Jupiter event was the death of Diana. So Diana... This is the time of the car crash in the Paris tunnel, August 31st, 1997. And at that time, Venus was trine Jupiter. Jupiter was right on the midheaven at the time of that crash. Looks great, really nice chart, Jupiter on the midheaven. But Venus was trine that Jupiter, Moon was opposition that Jupiter, Moon opposition Jupiter, right on the angles. That's what killed Diana. Interestingly, Diana had her Mars-Saturn midpoint on 0 degrees Aries. So 0 degrees Aries is the same as is aspected by 15 degrees fixed. So the Moon and Jupiter, to a lesser extent, were making a hard aspect to her Mars-Saturn midpoint, and plus the midheaven was fairly close to aspecting her Mars-Saturn midpoint. So that perhaps was what killed her. It was all about Diana's death. That's what really mattered. She was the central figure. But Dodi Fayed, with his Venus trine Jupiter, was involved in this, this car chase. It was all about indulgence, wasn't it? They'd been to some hotel in Paris. They were driving fast. They were having fun. They were trying to escape from journalists, but she needn't have been there. Venus trine Jupiter. It was for entertainment, and in this case, it was about death. And this is a reminder that Venus trine Jupiter, just because Venus is trine Jupiter, doesn't mean that always good things happen when Venus is trine Jupiter. The Idaho murder. This was when 4 students at Idaho University, they were sharing a house, and someone came into their house and deliberately killed them. It seemed to be very carefully planned. There is a man on trial for this crime, Brian Koberger. Of course, we don't know whether he did it or not. He's innocent till proven guilty. But Venus was trine Jupiter at the time of the murder. Look at Venus at 2633. So Venus was opposition Algol. I'm not quite sure whether one should use oppositions to Algol, but it certainly does seem to fit Venus opposition Algol and Venus trine Jupiter. So the Moon is also applying to the trine of Jupiter, and that's kind of unfortunate. I mean, you don't want to consider good times to commit horrific crimes, but like it or not, the Moon was close to the midheaven, and it was trine Jupiter, trine Venus, and something horrible happened, and 4 people were just slaughtered, and it's completely murdered for no reason. It was just, I don't know. We're not going to know for the moment why that crime was done, but there is Venus Jupiter trine at work, and so that's of course we're now talking about events, aren't we? And also Hitler came to power when Venus was trine Jupiter. So you could say from Hitler's perspective, it was a great day, January the 30th, 1933. Venus on the midheaven, Jupiter trine Venus. This is when he was appointed Chancellor of Germany. And I think Venus in Capricorn on the midheaven says it all, Venus trine Jupiter. It was great for Hitler and the Nazis, but it wasn't great for anyone else. So we shouldn't think that Venus-Jupiter trines, as we just saw with the murder chart, the Idaho chart, we shouldn't think that Venus trine Jupiter is always a good thing. It can be something something really awful. And with Venus trine Jupiter, you can have a war starting. The Civil War, the American Civil War. There's the American Civil War, started on April 12th, 1881. Sorry, 1861. I don't want to be like, remember those videos that people have when people are asked what date America got its independence, and they say things like, 1964 and 1981. I don't want to be like that. April 12th, 1861 is when the the American Civil War started, and there is Venus in Aries, and Jupiter is in Leo. Venus in Aries Venus can be the planet of war. That's sometimes forgotten, at least in my experience. And although particularly the planet of victory, the association with the Greek goddess Nike, perhaps, but Venus, particularly in Aries, does have a warlike sense to it. So Venus trine Jupiter, the start of the Civil War, that would kind of make sense. And continuing on the war theme, we have Operation Uranus. This was the Soviet attack on Stalingrad, which encircled Stalingrad and basically did for the Germans. And so Venus was at 26 Scorpio, and Jupiter was at, where's Jupiter gone? 25 Cancer. So a pretty close Venus trine Jupiter there. So it can be about acts of aggression, and acts of aggression perhaps being effective. Whether those acts of aggression are good or bad, and I suppose I haven't set up the chart, but Venus was trine Jupiter a couple of days ago when that Russian general Igor Kirillov, I got his name right, was murdered by the Ukrainians. There was a Venus trine Jupiter there. And I suppose in certain cases Venus trine Jupiter might make people rebellious. They want more. And the Whiskey Rebellion of July the 16th, 1794 started with Venus trine Jupiter. In fact, on the day of Venus trine Jupiter. And so the Whiskey Rebellion was a rebellion against George Washington's government, I think regarding whiskey tax. And it wasn't a particularly dramatic rebellion. I'm not sure. I don't think many people were killed, and it was put down fairly relatively leniently. But it was a rebellion taking place that started in Bower Hill, Pennsylvania, and it did happen at the time of a trine between Venus and Jupiter. And I suppose Venus and Jupiter can encourage people to do things that they wouldn't have done otherwise. And I suppose also with this rebellion, look at Uranus. It's not just that Jupiter is trine Venus. Jupiter is trine Uranus. Jupiter trine Uranus, wanting freedom. And in fact, Pluto. Look at Pluto opposition Venus, Pluto opposition Uranus, Jupiter hitting all of that. We're not happy with the situation, and we are going to act. And I think it was a tax collector or some official got mobbed. I don't know I don't know what happened in the end, but that's what happened. And he was sleeping in some inn, and the mob surrounded the inn, and that was the start of the Whiskey Rebellion. And I think that there was certainly a lot going on astrologically, including a trine between Venus and Jupiter. So that's it. That's all I'm going to say on the subject of Venus and Jupiter. It's an aspect which can be good, but at least in theory it's good. If one wants to take a rational perspective, one uses one's logic to work out how Venus and Jupiter should work out. But if one takes a more empirical view, maybe it's not quite as good as it's cut out to be. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. And if you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. Anyway, I will talk to you again tomorrow.